I had a hunch my wife was gearing up to leave me, so I quietly shifted my assets around. Sure enough, 3 weeks later, she went ahead and filed for divorce, but then tried to walk it back when things didn't go the way she expected. Hey everyone. Now just so you know, I've never been the paranoid type or one to assume the worst without good reason. My wife, Carrie, and I have been together for 5 years, married for 3. I really thought things were going well. Like any couple, we had our ups and downs, but nothing that ever made me think something was seriously wrong. Most of the time, we were a team. We had our little inside jokes, could spend forever debating what movie to watch, and had a rhythm that just worked. She'd plan these elaborate date nights, and I'd come home with her favorite takeout when she was wiped out from a long day. Everything felt easy, like we'd figured this whole love thing out. That's what made what happened next hit so hard. About 7 months ago, things started to shift. At first, it was little things, stuff you might overlook if you're not paying close attention. She began keeping her phone with her constantly, even just to head into the kitchen or fold laundry. Before that, her phone would sit untouched on the coffee table for hours, and she never cared if I picked it up. I remember making a joke one day, something like, "What? Are you running some secret spy operation now?" She laughed and said something like, "Nah, work's just been bugging me more than usual." All right, fair enough. But then, a few days later, she added a passcode. That one caught me off guard since she'd never used one before. When I asked about it, she mumbled something vague about hackers and online security. I didn't want to seem suspicious, so I let it go, but it just didn't sit right with me. And it didn't stop there. She started taking calls in other rooms, which was new for her. It wasn't subtle either. Her phone would ring, and she'd say, "Hang on, I need to grab this," and then disappear into the bedroom or head out to the porch. If I asked who it was, she'd just say it was someone from work. Then came another odd change. She started putting her phone face down on the table. I never even realized that was a thing until one day. I reached over to hand her something, and she quickly moved her phone out of the way. It was one of those blink and you miss it moments, but it stuck with me. It wasn't just the phone stuff either. She started to feel distant. Conversations that used to be easy and natural started feeling forced. If I brought up things like, "What should we do for our anniversary?" Or, "Do you think it's time to start saving for a new car?" she'd give me a half-hearted, "Yeah, maybe," and then change the subject. Everything finally came together on this one random Wednesday. She told me she was meeting a friend for coffee after work. Nothing weird about that. She does that sometimes. I happened to be out running errands nearby and thought, hey, I'll swing by and surprise her. Just a nice little gesture. But when I got there, she wasn't with anyone. She was pacing outside the cafe, on the phone. I stayed in the car, mostly because the way she was talking seemed serious. I didn't mean to listen in, but I picked up a few phrases like, "It's almost ready," and "starting fresh soon." My stomach dropped. I couldn't tell exactly what she was talking about, but it didn't sound like work stuff or a casual chat with a friend. It sounded like something bigger, something planned. When she got home, I asked her how her coffee date went, trying to sound casual. She launched into this story about how her friend was complaining about her boyfriend. It was so random that I just looked at her for a second, kind of stunned. I asked, "What do you mean?" She just shrugged. I just thought it made sense to have everything stored together. Our accounts, passwords, important documents, stuff like that, in case something unexpected happened. I didn't really know how to respond at first. We'd never talked about anything like that before, and the timing felt odd, especially considering the strange things I'd already noticed. I asked what kind of emergencies she meant, trying to sound relaxed. She just gave another shrug. "It's just the smart thing to do, right?" she said. "What if something happens to one of us? Or we have to make a quick financial choice?" On the surface, her point seemed logical, but the way she presented it felt too smooth, too practiced, like she'd been waiting for the perfect moment to bring it up. I nodded and said something like, "Yeah, that sounds reasonable." But inside, I was uneasy. Why bring this up now? We'd always kept our finances a bit loose, never really merging them. That night, I couldn't shake what she said. It kept looping in my head as I tried to make sense of it. Was this just normal grown-up planning and I was overthinking it? Still, I couldn't ignore the phone calls I'd overheard, the conversation I'd caught at the cafe, and the way she'd been acting distant lately. It all started adding up, and I didn't like where it was leading. I hadn't acted on any of it, at least not yet. But a few days later, she brought it up again. We were in the kitchen. I was putting together a sandwich while she scrolled through her phone. Out of nowhere, she asked if I'd given any more thought to getting the bank stuff organized, if I knew where everything was. I set the knife down and turned to look at her. Okay, what's going on? I asked, keeping my voice calm but serious. You've been bringing this up a lot lately. Is there something I should know about? She finally looked up, clearly surprised I'd called her on it. There's nothing going on, she said quickly, almost too quickly, which actually made me laugh a little. I just think it's something we should handle, that's all. You know, just in case. In case of what? I asked. She gave another shrug, her face hard to read. I don't know. Just life things. Nothing major. She swore it wasn't anything serious, just something we ought to stay ahead of. But the way she dodged giving a real answer only made me more uneasy. It didn't feel like a random suggestion anymore. It felt like she was holding something back, though I had no clue what. So the next day, while she was at work, I decided to do some digging. I logged into our joint account online and saw a few odd things. Nothing huge, but there had been some small withdrawals over the last few weeks that didn't seem tied to bills or groceries or anything regular. I didn't want to leap to conclusions, but it looked like she'd been quietly moving money out for reasons I couldn't figure out. I thought about bringing it up, but something told me to hold off. If I was wrong, I'd sound ridiculous. But if I was right, I needed to tread carefully. It was eating at me, so I called someone I trusted, an old college buddy who now works as a lawyer. I tried to explain what I'd found without sounding paranoid or dramatic. After I laid everything out, he said, Look, I'm not saying something's definitely happening, but you're not crazy for wanting to be ready. If you want to protect your assets, now's the time to do it. Better safe than sorry. He gave me some simple steps to take to protect my finances, just in case. I'll be honest, it felt strange, like I was bracing for some disaster I couldn't even name. But the more I thought about it, the more it seemed like the smart move. If she really was hiding something, and by then, I was starting to believe she might be, I had to be ready. Still, making that choice wasn't easy. This wasn't just about money. This was about everything we'd built together. I kept seeing flashes in my mind, our wedding day, those deep late-night talks about our future, the silly inside jokes only we understood. How did we end up here? Was this really what our marriage had become? Taking those steps felt like admitting something was broken, like I was giving up on the trust we'd once had. Later that evening, while she was out, I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and started going through it all: bank statements, investment accounts, even the property deed. My hands were shaking the whole time. As I flipped through each document, it felt like I was betraying her, but this nagging voice in my head kept reminding me that I wasn't doing this to be cruel. This was about protecting myself. I wasn't trying to hurt her. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that if I didn't take action now, I'd end up regretting it. I started putting together a quiet game plan, what I could move and how to do it without drawing attention. As I typed, this heavy pressure settled on my chest. I had trusted her completely for years, and now here I was, taking precautions like she was a threat. I ended up calling my mom. I didn't explain everything, just told her I needed a favor. I asked if she could hold on to a few things for me for a while. It's nothing bad, I said. Just something I need to do to cover myself. She was quiet for a bit, probably trying to piece together what I wasn't saying. Are you all right? She finally asked, clearly concerned. Yeah, I lied. It's just a backup plan. Nothing serious. She didn't push for more, but I heard the hesitation in her voice. Of course, sweetheart. Whatever you need. I ended the call feeling a weird mix of relief and guilt. I hated dragging her into this, but knowing she was on my side gave me a sense of stability in the middle of everything. By the time my wife got home, I had already started moving things. Most of my financial assets, our cash, investments, even the house, were quietly shifted into my mom's name. I left enough in our shared account to avoid raising questions, but the rest was locked up tight. She didn't suspect a thing. Walked in, gave me a quick kiss, asked if I wanted to put on a movie. I acted like everything was fine, but inside, I was a mess. There was a part of me that felt horrible, like I was betraying her. But another part of me felt like I was finally doing something to regain control. Things had felt out of balance for too long. For the next few days, I tried to keep things looking normal. I didn't want her to catch on. She seemed content, maybe even unusually upbeat. But instead of putting me at ease, it made me more uneasy. If she was hiding something, she was doing a good job. What stood out most was that she never brought up the finances again, not even after I'd questioned her about it. It was like the whole conversation had never happened. At first, I thought maybe she just dropped it because it didn't matter anymore. But the longer I sat with it, the more it felt like she was deliberately avoiding the subject. Like she was scared to revisit it after I called her out. I caught her watching me sometimes, like she was studying me, maybe trying to decide if it was safe to bring it up again. But every time I looked her way, she'd snap back to whatever she was doing, her phone, a show, a book. It wasn't obvious, but I noticed. It felt like she was waiting for me to reintroduce the topic, like she didn't want to be the one to poke the bear again. But the silence only made me more uneasy. That wasn't like her. If something mattered to her, she usually pushed until she got answers. Now, the fact that she wouldn't even mention it anymore seemed intentional. If she was testing the waters, she was playing it safe. And if she was holding back for a reason, I wasn't about to give her an opening. Whatever she was planning next, I needed to be a step ahead. Something was coming. I just didn't know what or when. All I could do was stay ready. That night, I made sure everything was in order. I reviewed all the transfers again, double-checked the paperwork for the assets I'd moved to my mom. The house, the savings, the investments, it was all in her name now, safely tucked into a trust with no strings attached. I even called to confirm she had everything she needed. 3 weeks passed, and on the surface, life looked totally normal. In fact, things felt a little too normal. She started being sweeter than usual, talking about random things, jobs, dinner plans, stuff that didn't matter. It threw me off because for months she'd been distant, only engaging in surface-level talk. For a moment, I began to wonder if I'd overblown the whole situation. Maybe she'd just been dealing with stress or something I didn't fully understand. But then one Saturday night, totally out of the blue, she sat me down on the couch, turned off the TV, and said, "We need to talk." The second she opened her mouth, I already knew what was coming. It hit me like a punch to the gut, cold and clinical. "I think we should get a divorce," she said, like she was announcing we were out of coffee. No emotion, no anger, just flat. It felt rehearsed. I just stared at her. For a second, I couldn't even process it. She started giving the usual lines. She needed space, wanted to rediscover herself, felt like she'd lost her identity in the relationship. You know, the kind of vague, generic things people say when they're already halfway out the door. But then she added something that landed differently. She said she'd made a lot of sacrifices for me over the years and that I didn't appreciate them. That she deserved more. That part stayed with me. It didn't feel like a separation. It felt like an accusation. Like I owed her something. Like she'd been carrying a burden that was all my fault, and now she was just cashing in. As she kept talking, something started to feel off. I wasn't just wondering why she was doing this, but why now? What changed? And that's when she dropped the real clue. She said a friend had been helping her see things more clearly. She didn't even look at me when she said it, just kind of dropped it there like it was no big deal. But the way she said it, it didn't sound casual. It sounded calculated. So now I had a different question. Who the hell was this friend? And why were they so deep in my marriage? It didn't feel like friendly advice. It felt like someone had been behind the curtain, stirring the pot, convincing her that walking away wasn't just a choice. It was some kind of strategic move. Like she'd been coached. And the more she talked about her supposed sacrifices, the more I started piecing things together. Sacrifices? Really? She'd said she was happy with me. And I wasn't some absentee husband. I worked hard for both of us. I didn't just bring in money. I listened, I supported, I compromised. When she asked to move closer to her job, I said okay, even though it made my commute miserable. When she wanted to go to that expensive yoga retreat last year, I helped make it work financially. I skipped a trip I'd been planning just so she could have that experience. Twice she changed careers, and both times, I backed her. Encouraged her, even. Because that's what I thought being a good partner looked like. I didn't just check boxes, I showed up. I remembered the little things. Surprised her with stuff she'd mentioned in passing. When she said she felt stuck, I planned date nights. I listened, even when I didn't fully understand what she was venting about. I tried. Maybe I didn't always nail it, but I put in the effort. And now she was sitting there acting like I'd failed her? Like I didn't give enough? I couldn't buy into that version of events. This wasn't about me falling short. Something had shifted in her, and maybe it had to do with this mysterious friend she kept referencing. Whoever they were, they clearly had a hand in this. The woman sitting across from me didn't feel like the same person I married. And I wasn't about to let her twist our history into something it wasn't, just to make herself feel better about bailing. So I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't even ask questions. I just nodded and told her something neutral, something like, if that's how you feel, then we should figure out what happens next. And that threw her. She clearly expected a fight, thought I'd beg or yell or fall apart. But I didn't, because by then, my focus had already shifted. I was done reacting. I wanted to understand what had caused this calculated shift in her. People don't just wake up one morning and decide to leave. Not like this. This had been in motion for a while, and I wasn't about to be caught off guard again. After that conversation, she went to stay in her own apartment. And by Monday, I had the divorce papers in my hands. Let me tell you, they weren't just asking for a clean break. This was a hit job. She wanted half the house, a cut of my savings, access to my investments, and even the car. On top of that, there were these weirdly worded spousal support terms that made zero sense considering she made good money herself. It felt like she and her little friend had been planning this move for a while, waiting for the moment I'd be least ready, hoping I'd panic and hand everything over. She wasn't just walking away from the marriage. She was trying to walk away with everything I'd worked for. At first, I wanted to believe she was just lashing out, driven by bitterness. But the way she presented her demands, so precise, so polished, it started to feel like something more calculated. Someone was guiding her. No way she came up with all that on her own. It wasn't just emotional chaos. It was strategy. So I started doing my own digging. I couldn't just outright ask who had been whispering in her ear. She'd either lie or shut down. I had to be smarter. So I went to the one place people forget gives away more than they think: social media. She hadn't blocked me, and even though she wasn't a frequent poster, I combed through every picture, every tag, every comment. I wasn't looking for drama. I was looking for a pattern. And eventually, I found one. His name was Malcolm. Nothing screamed affair at first glance, just repeated likes, casual comments. Harmless on the surface, but still enough to feel off. I clicked into his profile. It was open. Typical guy in his 30s working in marketing. Normal, unassuming. But then I saw something that made my stomach twist. He had posted a photo at the same cafe I had seen her at a few weeks earlier, the same day I overheard her talking to someone about starting fresh. That wasn't a coincidence. And as I scrolled further, things started stacking up. A comment on one of her photos that said, "You've got this." A selfie that looked like it was taken from the window of her new apartment. No one thing was damning, but altogether, it screamed something was going on. Still, it wasn't enough to confront her. I needed more. So I started reaching out to people we both knew. Friends we had in common. People who might have seen or heard something. The first one I tried was Monica. She and my wife had been close for years. I played it casual. Asked if she'd talked to my wife recently, tried to steer the conversation toward anything that felt unusual. But Monica shut me down fast. Claimed she didn't know anything about this friend my wife had mentioned helping her through things. Said she had no insight, no advice, nothing. It felt too abrupt. Like she was nervous. Like she was trying to avoid saying too much. Still, I didn't stop. I called another mutual friend, Alice. Same approach, different name. Light conversation, easing into some questions about the situation. At first, Alice was vague, guarded. But when I asked her directly if she knew who my wife had been spending time with lately, she got quiet and then ended the call. But a few minutes later, my phone rang again. It was Alice. She said she had to be careful, didn't want anything she said traced back to her. I promised I wouldn't involve her, and after a long pause, she finally spilled what she knew. Apparently, my wife had been spending a lot of time with someone named Malcolm. Met him through work. And from what Alice had gathered, he was heavily involved in giving my wife advice about the divorce. Encouraging her. Coaching her. And that was it. The last piece I needed. It was never just about space or self-discovery. It was about him. Malcolm was the reason for the distance. For the sudden coldness. For the way she made it sound like the divorce was something empowering instead of devastating. Now I needed to confirm it for myself. So that weekend, I drove to her new apartment and parked a block away. No confrontation, just observation. I didn't want a scene. I just needed the truth. A few hours went by, and then I saw them. She came out of the building with Malcolm. They weren't holding hands, but the body language said everything. The way they walked close, leaned into each other while talking, it was enough. They got into his car and drove off. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. Everything was already clear. She hadn't just fallen out of love. She hadn't been lost. She'd been transitioning from a marriage with me into whatever was going on with Malcolm. All the emotional distance, the talk of deserving more, the sudden aggressive push for divorce, it was all part of a larger plan. She wasn't just leaving me. She was setting up her next chapter, and she wanted to leave me with nothing while she did it. I drove home in silence that night, the weight of everything I'd discovered pressing down on me. And what hurt the most wasn't even the betrayal. It was the cold-blooded planning behind it. The way it was all so calculated. She wasn't just walking away from our life, she was using me as a launch pad for something new, with someone else in her corner. But she didn't know what I had in mind. I wasn't just going to let her walk away clean. Not after all the lies. Not after trying to take everything I'd built. She'd lit the match, but I was about to take control of the fire. The very first mediation session felt like walking straight into a battlefield. Tense, cold, and clearly choreographed on her end. Her lawyer showed up dragging this ridiculous binder. Seriously, the thing looked like it belonged in a courtroom for some massive corporate fraud trial. And from the moment he started speaking, I could tell they thought they had me right where they wanted me. He laid out her demands with this infuriating sense of confidence. Half the house, a chunk of my savings, my car, other assets, and even some vague nonsense about spousal support. The way he spoke, you'd think it was all completely fair. I didn't flinch. I let him talk. I kept my mouth shut and my expression unreadable, waiting for my lawyer to handle what we'd prepared. And then it was our turn. My lawyer slid a folder across the table, neat, deliberate, and said, "Before we move forward, I think everyone should review this." Her lawyer took it without much concern, just another formality to him. At first. But that changed fast. As he flipped through the pages, his eyebrows started to pull together. He went from smug to visibly confused, then concerned. "What is this?" he asked, clearly thrown off. My lawyer stayed calm and measured, exactly as we'd practiced. He explained that all of my major assets had been legally transferred into an irrevocable trust under my mother's name, weeks before she even filed. Her lawyer looked completely blindsided. He turned to her, asking if she had known anything about this. She snatched the papers from his hands, frantically flipping through them. Her face turned red with disbelief and then darker, angrier. The realization hit her like a brick wall. This wasn't a bluff. She looked at me, eyes narrowed, and accused me like I had done something criminal. Like I was the villain here. She said I planned to screw her over. I didn't even respond. I didn't need to. It was all there in front of her, dates, signatures, everything in legal order. She didn't realize how far ahead I'd been thinking, how carefully I'd moved. Her lawyer asked for clarification, clearly hoping for some loophole, but there wasn't one. My lawyer laid everything out step by step, detail by detail. Every move I'd made, every transfer, every signature was legally sound and fully documented. There was nothing left for them to challenge. Her fury was palpable. She leaned forward and called me unbelievable, said she couldn't believe I'd do something like this. But the truth was, I wasn't doing anything to her. I was protecting myself from someone who clearly had no intention of leaving things fair or honest. By the time the session wrapped up, her lawyer was clearly flustered and muttering about needing to rethink their strategy. But we all knew the truth. There was no strategy left. I'd pulled the ground out from under them. As we left the building, she caught up to me in the hallway. Her expression was this twisted mix of rage and desperation. She leaned in close and hissed that it wasn't over, that I was going to regret what I'd done. I just looked at her and said, "I already regret trusting you." And I meant it. But I hadn't anticipated how quickly things would unravel for her after that. It didn't take long for the fallout to begin. That night, she started calling. At first, the messages sounded calm, like maybe she'd come to her senses. She left voicemails saying we needed to talk, that maybe we'd let things go too far. It almost sounded like remorse. But when I didn't reply, the tone changed fast. By the next day, the messages started to swing between crying and raging. One minute, she was heartbroken, claiming she didn't want to lose everything we built. The next, she was yelling, accusing me of being cold and greedy, and blaming me for everything going wrong in her life. I ignored it all. My attorney told me not to engage, and I didn't even want to. I was done with the mind games. But clearly, she wasn't. And when the direct approach failed, she took it public. Friends started reaching out. Mutuals, people we'd both known for years. They told me she was spreading some bizarre story, saying the whole divorce was fake, that it was a prank, that we'd staged it as some elaborate test or social experiment. I honestly couldn't believe what I was hearing. Who does that? The problem with her lie was that it had too many cracks. Real legal paperwork had been filed. Lawyers had been hired. There were records, bills, demands. No one in their right mind stages something like that for a joke. So naturally, people started asking questions. Things like, if this is a prank, why are you actually in mediation? Or, why are there legal documents involved? When they didn't buy the hoax angle, she pivoted. Said it wasn't a prank, it was a test to see how strong our relationship really was. As if the emotional carnage and financial mess were some twisted love quiz. But she underestimated people's intelligence. And she really underestimated how prepared I was for all of this. At this point, it was beyond clear. This wasn't just about her leaving me. It was about control, and when she lost it, she fell apart. Her story kept shifting because she didn't know what to do with the fact that her plan had completely backfired. But for the first time in months, I wasn't scrambling to catch up. I was ahead, and she had no idea what else I might have ready. After the mediation fallout, she flipped the narrative. Suddenly, I was the villain, cold, heartless, unforgiving. She started telling everyone that my reaction had devastated her, that I'd betrayed her trust and crossed every line. She leaned hard into the role of the wounded wife, the one who just wanted to work things out, while I supposedly blew it all up. At first, some people actually bought it. I started getting random emails and awkward messages from people we both knew. Some of them hinted at how rough things must have been for her, or how they didn't realize I had been so extreme. Even her brother took a shot at me, saying I should have just talked it out instead of going nuclear. It was frustrating, but I kept quiet. I figured the truth would come out sooner or later. And sure enough, it did. Thanks to someone I never expected. There was this guy, Brain. We weren't close, more like friendly acquaintances. We crossed paths at parties or group hangouts, but never hung out one-on-one. A few weeks after mediation, I got a message from him out of nowhere. He said he had something I needed to see, something important. When we met up, he pulled out his phone and opened up a thread of text messages. At first, I didn't get what I was looking at. Then I saw names, hers, and Malcolm's. My stomach dropped. I asked him how he even had these messages. Turns out, Brain and Malcolm had a mutual friend, someone who'd been around for some of their conversations. That guy had started getting uncomfortable with what he was hearing. Malcolm had apparently been bragging, talking about how he was helping her secure her future. It didn't take a genius to figure out what that really meant. That mutual friend felt uneasy keeping quiet, so he took screenshots of the messages and sent them to Brain, figuring Brain was on good enough terms with me to give me a heads up. Brain said Malcolm had been playing both sides, cheering her on while pretending to be her rock, pushing her to bleed me for everything she could and promising they'd start fresh once the dust settled. The texts were disgusting. She wasn't just venting about the divorce to Malcolm, she was openly strategizing with him. They were talking about what she should ask for, how to phrase things, how to push my guilt. There was one line where she said, "Once the settlement's done, we'll have everything we need." Malcolm responded, "Don't back down. Make him feel guilty if you have to. He owes you. We'll start fresh once you've got the money." I read through those messages over and over, stunned. This wasn't heartbreak or some confused emotional spiral. This was calculated. It was planned. She'd been working me over from the start with Malcolm as her co-pilot. Suddenly, all her behavior made perfect sense. Why she pulled away so suddenly, why she became obsessed with our finances, why she pushed so hard for unreasonable terms. It was never about closure. It was about cashing out. I thanked Brain. He didn't have to get involved, but I was glad he did. And apparently, I wasn't the only one he shared the texts with. Word got out fast. People started seeing through her story. The sympathy she'd been soaking up dried out almost overnight. People who had previously been neutral, or even had her back, started backing away. Even her closest friends began to distance themselves once they saw what she'd been really doing. Her whole support system crumbled. By the time the divorce finalized, she was left with nothing but her personal stuff. Her lawyer quietly dropped most of her demands, likely realizing they had no legal foundation to stand on. The documents my attorney had prepared, those early asset transfers into the trust, held strong. That trust, tied to my mother, was airtight. And Malcolm? Gone. The minute things stopped going her way, he disappeared. Not a word, not a goodbye. Just vanished. Honestly, I think he used her the same way she tried to use me. He sold her dreams about a new beginning, whispered lies about freedom and reinvention, but when the reality hit that there was no payout, he bailed. She unraveled after that. Her calls and messages didn't stop, but they shifted. No more accusations. No more yelling. Just begging. The tone was entirely different now. Pleading, desperate. Voicemails like, "Please, can we talk? I'll do anything to fix this. And you don't have to forgive me, but can't we just settle this and move on?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. It was far too late for reconciliation. Whatever we once had was buried under manipulation, lies, and greed. There was no coming back from that. Even her family began pulling away. Her brother, who'd been so quick to judge me, actually reached out at one point. He apologized for the things he'd said he had no idea what she was really doing. He told me he regretted ever taking her side without asking more questions. By the end, everything had flipped. She set out to destroy me in that divorce, to come out the other side with everything. But she lost it all. She lost her credibility, her support, even her partner in crime. And I didn't win out of revenge. I survived because I prepared. I saw who she really was just in time. And once that mask came off, there was no putting it back on. I kept the house, my savings, and finally found something I hadn't felt in years: peace. My mom showed up with paint buckets and a dozen ideas to help me make the place feel like mine again. Now, I'm living without second-guessing everything, without feeling betrayed. Just calm. She's a closed chapter, one I no longer reread.